Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, there's always got to be one, and if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals, and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, I'm going to assume that you do, because you're listening right now. You can subscribe to the podcast. Hit that subscribe button, give us that old 5-star rating. Basically, wherever you get your podcasts. We're at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google. It's pretty much all good. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there, we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to follow us on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, and the Instagram, as the kids call it. At where else? We're at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca, for all the latest and greatest from basically the moving image at large. Film, television, festivals, you name it. Because if we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please pay us a visit. On this episode, we got a real interesting one. It's a film that's coming to video on demand today. It is called End of the Line. It's a documentary from an award-winning filmmaker by the name of Emmett Adler, who we had the unique pleasure of talking to. But it looks at the vital economic importance of mass transit and the subway system, specifically the New York subway system, and it chronicles some of the modern-day troubles they were having in the late 2010 when there was flooding, overcrowding, power failures, derailments, the whole 9 yards. But when the then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo proclaims a state of emergency and hires an executive by the name of Andy Byford, who audiences here in Toronto will know worked on the Toronto transit system for quite a while, they wanted to make him this hero, and they wanted to make him sort of the wunderkind who's going to save New York Transit. But this film documents a lot of political turmoil and just shows how vital transit is, but how it's used as a political pawn at the same time, which is really unfortunate. And it's a fascinating film to watch, especially for anybody who lives in the big city. And plus, it also highlights just sort of what happened a little bit in New York during COVID when it comes to transit, and it really does paint an interesting portrait of how people who work in transit are very emotionally invested in transit. And it's an important subject to them. It's an important subject to us because, I mean, hey, I live in a city and I needed to get around. But so we had the unique pleasure of sitting down with Emmett to talk about sort of his inspiration for the film and sort of all the issues that sort of came up within. But it's a fantastic film, which is available on all video on demand platforms today, like, Apple, iTunes, Amazon, Google, and so forth. So I do recommend you check it out. But first, enjoy our talk with Emmett, because between you and me, it's a good one.
All right. Well, Emmett, obviously, first off, man, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Dave.
No, I mean, congratulations on the film, man. I mean, I absolutely loved it. And I mean, I live in Toronto, so I mean, I've seen some of these things sort of boots on the ground happen kind of thing. And I mean, I'm kind of curious because this is such a growing problem, but at the same time, I'm kind of curious for you, why was this, why did this story gonna have to be your first film? Like, what was it about it that made you want to sort of tell this story?
Yeah, I mean, there was a practical element to it. As a filmmaker, this was something that was happening right on my doorstep. So I didn't have to fund a crew to go somewhere else to just see if we could do this. This was a thing that was, it started with me just filming business owners, community board meetings, those types of things. And it grew a great deal from there. But, and then the other aspect of it is I was a daily subway rider. And there was a transit crisis that came up that was affecting specifically the line of the New York subway that was my lifeline. It was going to sever this one train line from connecting between Brooklyn and Manhattan. I lived in Brooklyn, work in Manhattan every day, took the train to and from Manhattan every day, sometimes 3-4 times a day. And that was no longer going to be possible. So this was going to uproot my life. I was going to have to move. And it was unthinkable, like what it would do to businesses. In New York, lots of people, basically everyone that I knew, didn't own a car. You rely on the subway, businesses rely on the subway. And because this line was damaged, they were going to cut off a massive population. In New York, the numbers are crazy. This line alone was about the size of San Francisco's entire transit system.
Oh, yikes.
I mean, at the time when I started filming this, 5 million people a day overall rode the New York subway system. And this one train line, this one tunnel that they were going to close, 400,000 people a day passed through that tunnel.
And I mean, I know you did I know you showed it in the film, but I mean, they did sort of offer alternate bus routes and whatnot, but I mean, it would have basically added hours to your day commute-wise, correct?
Yeah, just imagine if there's a highway you take every day to work, or a train or whatever that, that's like just the most massive highway or train in the city. If they close that, what that would do to the rest of the city. They were going to attempt alternatives, but closing that line was going to be a major crisis for the city at large.
Yeah, we have some big lines here in Toronto. When they close down, even if it's only for a couple hours, it's pandemonium, and it's crazy just how reliance these major city centers are on public transit. But at the same time, I mean, I think something about your film, which I loved, you really dove into sort of the minutia and sort of the day-to-day and the logistics and sort of how complex it is to get all this done. I mean, I'm kind of curious because, I mean, and your film shows this, and I mean, this is something we had up here for us as well. It was a question of debating on doing something to a point where it was like, just, and pardon my French, just shut up and fucking do something.
Yeah.
And seeing that play out again yet in New York was kind of fascinating. Like when you were sort of asking for access and trying to talk to people, was there pushback? Were people sort of interested? Because this seems like a very contentious issue, and I have no idea why it's a contentious issue, because I mean, it's so obvious why we need all this. But was there kind of pushback on your end when you were trying to talk, to people sort of higher ups in terms of dealing with subway logistics?
Absolutely. This story went all the way to the top in New York, which in the time of this filming was the governor, Andrew Cuomo of New York, who is, famously a controlling, domineering leader. And so there was a lot of timidity around talking to me around my project for a long time. I remember showing a press representative at one point a sizzle reel that we were using for fundraising. And the MTA is the organization like the TTC in Toronto that runs the system. And he just basically turned pale and was like, no one is going to talk to you if you show them this. No one is going to want to see this. And, the MTA doesn't want necessarily like a cinematic feature film made about how bad their service is. You know what I mean? There is a flip side to that where the MTA is composed of people who really care about transit. And, it's a catch-22 because the only way they can get money is if there is a crisis. And so highlighting the crisis in a way, is the only way to raise awareness and to sort of make these issues better. But, Governor Cuomo did not want to be tied to this. One thing that we tried to clarify in the film and make it really simple is that the buck stopped with him. And there's a lot of political, maneuvering and a lot of effort put into avoiding responsibility for these issues. And we made it our goal to hold him accountable.
No, I mean, I think you did that. And I mean, I'm kind of curious because the more I watched the film, the more I was amazed. I mean, not even amazed, but I'm glad that somebody captured the fact that from a governmental standpoint, when it comes to transit in these big cities, it feels like governments treat it like, it's a 5-year-old child who's just sticking their fingers in the air going, la, 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 la. If I ignore it and it'll go away. Like, as you dove into it, is there anything that kind of surprised you from a bureaucratic standpoint on why this almost feels like it's an issue where people just want to put their heads in the sand and hope it goes away.
Yeah, it was all surprising as sort of a layman, like subway rider average, didn't really like study the situation and why the commute was bad. I just dealt with the commute.
Yeah.
I did not know the degree of like political puppet mastery that was going on behind the scenes that was creating this scenario. And so, everything that we sort of revealed in the film about that was something that was revealed to me at some point. And you just see the level of decisive action, the deliberate nature of what's going on behind the scenes, the political maneuvering that creates this scenario, that is really not something that the public is necessarily aware of, and that's intentional too. So, we kind of, by keeping our cameras on the situation for a 5-year period, that's the only way to really like catch the hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah.
Because you see someone and then you see them, over time kind of flip their story or contradict, their initial push. And so when we started to see that happen and we're holding the camera there, we were like, this is crazy. And you don't think that like the New York subway system is going to have this sort of seedy, political aspect to it, but it does.
No, I'm curious because obviously in your film we get glimpses of London and other places, and transit in a big city is obviously a massive, complex issue that I certainly want to tackle. It feels like North America gets it wrong, and I'm kind of curious from your perspective, why does North America get this issue wrong, where everywhere else seems to get it more or less right?
Yeah. Well, I would say, at least we look at Toronto like, wow, we think America gets it wrong because, Andy Byford was in Toronto before coming to New York, and he won this prestigious award in Toronto, the Transit System of the Year. Toronto was in 2017 when Byford left. So,
and then someone else got elected and undid everything he did, but that's another story.
So it goes, transit systems kind of rise and fall like the stock market. At least the New York subway system, I've noticed, does. But, I can speak most knowledgeably about the situation in America, our democratic system.
For sure.
And I know Canada has a lot of similarities, but I think it has to do with, our political system and the way that it needs a crisis to react. It's not it doesn't have a lot of foresight. Countries that lean towards, more welfare state, socialist type of government tend to be out ahead on these things. And I'm not, say what you will about like all that, but that's the reality. There's a reason China was able to like build 20 new transit systems in like the last 10 years, these crazy numbers, is because they come in and they take land from the people who are there. In America, you can't take people's land. We have this issue where they try to build the California bullet train, and everywhere they try to build it is a new political fiefdom.
For sure.
Where they're like, okay, you got to grease my fingers, or, anyways, I'm getting in the weeds a bit, but I think you understand what I'm getting at here.
No, for sure. No, it's so complex. And you've got these complexities on one side, but then on the other side, the lack of attention to the retailer or, the person with the hair salon or sort of the independent business owner was stunning. As you dove into that side of it,
yeah,
how shocked, I was shocked, but how shocked were you to sort of see? I guess indifference might be the right word, because it wasn't a question of they were actively going out to hurt him, but they just didn't care if they were there anyway. We were just going to do what we're going to do, and you just deal with it.
Yeah. Those are the human struggles at the heart of the story. And it was definitely hard to like sort of be front and center to hear those stories. And I knew they would exist, which was part of, again, going back to why I set out on this, because like these systems are so vital to people's livelihoods. And yeah, like, they don't do such a good job necessarily of hearing every, and once it gets going in one direction, it's really hard to stop and to slow it down. And this was a lot of people caught up in, in just a rough scenario with the government moving really hard in a certain direction.
Well, and I mean, something else that you showed in the film, which really caught me off guard, but I kind of loved it, was just the people working in transit, sort of the day-to-day, in the minutia of it. I was surprised by how invested they were and how much they cared. Like, was that something that sort of caught you off guard the more you dove into it, how much these people genuinely enjoy what they do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you have different types. Like when you talk about a transit organization, you have the people who are sort of like the executives at the top, and then you have the day-to-day workers, and people want to like just classify, like, I hate the MTA or I hate the TTC, and they're all, jerks because my commute is bad. And what I think people lose in that sort of like blanket statement is the complexity of like the varying perspectives within an organization, which in the case of the MTA is like 50,000 people or something like that. Mm-hmm. So it's a public jobs program that employs massive, amounts of working class New Yorkers who on a daily basis take the blame and are sometimes literally assaulted because of the service, which is the result of, they're just punching the clock basically. And that's the result of political decisions. And then executives can be a smattering of loyalists to different politicians who appoint them. And sometimes they can also, often they're lobbyists who really, really want to improve the system. I mean, look, working in transit is not a glamorous, grabbing the, usually it's not on the silver screen. We did it for them, but, these people by and large really care, and a lot of them are in pretty tough situations every day.
No, I mean, I'm kind of curious for you because, I mean, this was your first sort of feature effort. How was it dealing with a subject that wasn't necessarily a person? It was just this multi-headed hydra sort of an organization. Was it easier? Was it harder?
It was hard, definitely, to like sort of pitch early on because like, if we're getting into like the filmmaker kind of stuff, like most funders and whatnot are looking for like something that's really like clearly like a character driven thing. And ultimately we found that largely with Andy Byford.
For sure.
But we didn't get his interview until the very end. It was hard to I don't think we knew what our story really was until the very end, when we sort of ultimately understood it and saw the way that some of these like political power struggles played out. There was a natural arc to it that we found. The pandemic happened, and we thought maybe we don't even have a film anymore. And then the New York subway was very central to the American New York story of the pandemic, as the subway transported the essential workers in the epicenter of New York throughout the pandemic. And there were a lot of transit workers who died of COVID, which was just a really difficult situation and, a heroic situation, in that they continued going to work every day when, there was like massive casualties happening. It gave our story a whole new meaning, that aspect. So it was a lot of unknown, and we didn't shoot a lot of our interviews until the very end, when we sort of figured out what our story was. And then we asked them about those aspects and highlighted that footage.
No, I mean, I'm curious for you because you were in the middle of it. And I mean, I love what you said earlier just about really this is an issue that people don't deal with until there's a crisis.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, COVID was and is a crisis, but at the same time, it almost doesn't feel like that's the crisis that's really going to get this fixed. And I mean, I'm kind of curious as you've made this and shown this to people and been in the middle of it. Is there a way to fix this, or is it just a question of even people working in transit kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop with yet another crisis to hit to maybe get some improvements down the line?
Well, so in 2021, the Biden administration approved like a massive, one of many massive packages of spending, but $1 trillion that's specifically supposed to be for our infrastructure. That to me was the culmination of like everything that I had witnessed as far as efforts to, it's all about government investment. I mean, and there's a lot of structural problems within the way money moves through these organizations,
Yeah.
which are deeper. And that's the question where you're like, well, that's kind of the pessimistic side because it costs more in America or more in New York to build a mile of subway than it does. Like, there are these crazy numbers. Like in Europe, you could build like a whole train line for, what it costs to build like 50 yards of track in America or something like that. So, and that has, those problems go deep but as far as the investment, there's got to be, you have to be optimistic about this level of investment because it's the greatest investment we've seen in like 100 years since FDR.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to be optimistic about that, then, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I mean, I for one hope it pays off because I mean, on one end, I mean, I think this film is going to be something that anybody who lives in a major city center is going to be glued to because they're going to understand it. They're going to recognize it. And I know up here in Canada, we're still fighting for money on the federal level. And I mean, just as someone who relies on my transit system on a day-to-day basis, man, I hope the money that the MTA gets and is going to get put to good use is something that can be applied up here in Canada as well. And I mean, I think your film really highlights sort of all the issues and the importance of transit for nations in general, because I mean, it's one of those things where if you don't have a good transit system, the city centers die. And I mean, that's where the economic heart of so many countries is. And it's really one of those issues that, again, like we said, people put their head in the sand, it gets pushed to the back burner, but it's such an important thing. And I think your film really highlights that in a fantastic way. And just, man, Emmett, thank you for the time today and congrats on the good work, man. I can't wait to see what's next.
Awesome. I appreciate that, David. And, it'll be available all across North America to anyone who wants to watch it a week from today on June 14th on Apple TV and Amazon and wherever you
most video
find your films.
Platforms, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, many platforms. So, and if you need a reminder, go and follow us on social media at End of Line Doc, at End of Line Doc. No the in there on the social media handle on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. We have a website, endoftheline.com. Where you can get more information and you can even pre-order it now and check out the trailer on Apple TV. So, look it up, check it out, learn about transit and these issues that affect us all.
Absolutely, man. And, thanks again for the time. And I will definitely be putting all that info in the tag when we post this for sure, because it's an important thing. And I hope people get to see it, man. Honest to God, good work. And again, thanks for the time today.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
All right. Cheers, Emmett.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.